Welcome to the Endure Hunt podcast. Join me as I share my experiences as an emergent hunter, offer advice on how to overcome challenges, and pursue your passion for hunting. I am Andrew Koltsoon, and this is a very special episode for me. For those of you who are just joining or listening for the first time, I started hunting 6 years ago, and I started this podcast as a way of sharing my experiences, learning, to help other people that want to get started with hunting. It's incredibly difficult to start out on your own, and I want to put out resources and information and my own struggles to help people. On this episode, we're following up from episode 12, where I had one of my best friends, Andrew Koltsoon, on as he is officially going on his first hunting season ever. Well, he is back. The season's just about over, and we have a lot to discuss. I'm very excited to have you back on. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me on. I don't remember where we left off last time, but I'm sure it was either before the season or just as the season here was kicking off. And I think we have a lot to talk about now. So, yeah.
We have plenty to talk about. So we recorded and released this episode, went live July 26th, well before the season.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, you were still getting sighted in, learning the muzzleloader, I feel like. So you had done your preparation, and I don't remember if you had gotten the permit for the spot yet. I know you are doing the planning, and no, you know what? I think you did. You had talked about how you waited in line, you got there really early and got some good information. So that was definitely on the last episode. So I guess let's pick up from there. You got your permit, and now you're prepping to actually go into the hunting season. What was that like?
So last time I basically had to wake up early, go to the township, wait in line with all the other hunters to choose, which tract of land in the town that I'm going to be hunting. There are only 4 options that were for muzzleloader. The rest are bow only. So I was lucky to get there early enough. I wasn't first in line. It might have been, I don't know, number 9 or 10. But I was the first one for the piece of land that I chose. So that was awesome. I got that locked in. Super pumped about that. And then from then on, basically, it was just prepping, getting comfortable with the weapon, getting sighted in, getting, mainly just really comfortable using, getting repetition in, which I think comes in handy. Having a lot of reps and knowing the weapon pretty well, is a good way to make your chances of success a lot higher. So, there was multiple trips to the range throughout September, October, I think maybe even early November. Some of those trips were great. Some of them were frustrating. I came back like, oh, am I going to be able to do this? So there was, it kind of went back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of what I was doing in that time was going to the range and practicing. And then also talking with you and Peter and like finding out what's the best gear for gutting and knives and boning knives and like other pieces of gear that I hadn't already had from just general outdoors stuff. So it was a lot of that. It was practicing and then gearing up and getting ready. I don't think I had as much time as I would have liked to actually go out in the land closer to the time when I would start hunting. I think the first time that I made it to that land to kind of scout since before I got my permit to go look at it was when I went to go put up the tree stand. Which actually is yours, so thank you for that. I know Peter had it. When you left the state, you gave it to Peter, and then I went to Peter, so I picked it up from him. So thank you to both of you. So yeah, the stand I was using was that one. So when I went to go set up the stand, that was kind of the first time that I was back in that land. But yeah, that's a lot of what I did between then and now.
So let's talk a bit about gear. So I don't want to dive too much into the muzzleloader specifically because I do want to come back with you and just have a podcast dedicated to muzzleloaders. But I think from an emergent hunter, first-gen hunter standpoint, gear can be daunting. And you are one of the most financially responsible people I know. What was your philosophy about gear? What kind of gear did you use? What did you need to find success? And I will say this. The muzzleloader season is a late season hunt in New Jersey. It's whitetail hunting. It's cold, it's windy, and it's usually wet, whether you're getting rain, or snow, hail, maybe all of the above. You've got to have something to stay out there. So what kind of gear did you use? How did you find the gear? What kind of advice do you have for someone that might be going out on their first season and is concerned about Sitka and all the other big name brands. A jacket costs 300, $400.
Yeah, yeah. So thankfully, I was pretty good on set on the clothing end of things. I just use a lot of my regular like winter clothes, layer up and that kind of stuff. A lot of that actually, thankfully, I already had from the hunting trip that me, you, Peter did to Utah in October of 2020. So I had a set of pants and base layers and all that kind of stuff. So that came in handy. And then as far as the other gear, you already know this, but I'm a big fan of like the Buy It for Life community. That's a big thing on Reddit, and then also like the Reddit hunting page. So I'd look in there, read through reviews, read through past posts that other people did, and kind of if there's certain name brands I see coming up over and over, or certain models of things coming up over and over. I use that to kind of guide where I go. The main thing I had to get was like new boning knives. I had to pick a field dress kit. So I think I ended up going with Havalon for that. I don't remember which model it is, but it's the dual-sided one where one side is like the surgical blade, the other side's a saw, which did come in handy. I used both of those in the field. Yeah. I think I got a real tree or real edge boning knife, 5-inch or 6-inch boning knife. That was awesome too. And yeah, I mean, most of the base layers and clothing I already had. The one thing that I did do some research on and decide to actually go with, which I'm not sure if a lot of people actually do this, but I did look up like safety harnesses and that kind of stuff. So when you're up in the tree, this is my first time. I have no fear of heights. I like climbing and trees and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't bother me at all. But when you add a firearm into the mix and weather and long hours of sitting in the cold, I don't really want to mess with that. So I did get myself a good safety harness and off to the win.
What kind of? Well, I'll talk about the safety harness for a moment. As someone who is terrified of heights, the safety harness is incredibly important to me. But
yeah,
just for anyone listening, if you take your hunter safety course, it'll say this. But seriously, wear a harness. Wear your harness. It's the number one injury that happens for hunters across the United States. Wear your harness. Don't think that you're going to be fine or whatever. You should always have a tether to the tree. Even when I'm setting up my stand, because I use a climber and a hang-on stand now, I made a sort of, I use climbing ropes. I use a Prusik knot to make a sort of, the fancy stands now, the ones that are replacing the hang-on stands. I can't remember the name of them. Saddles, like the tree saddle tether. I made my own version of that, and I use it for going up and down, and then I swap from that over to the regular safety harness. I'm a little overly cautious because I'm scared of heights. But seriously, people don't not wear a safety harness. Were you wearing camo? That's what kind of, were you wearing camo? Were you wearing regular clothes? For me, I like buying dual purpose gear. Even now, I do have camo, but when it comes to like pants and some jackets, like my puffy clothes, I would wear anywhere. I don't want them specifically for hunting. Right. So what was your philosophy about that kind of stuff?
I didn't really consider camo very much. This style of hunting, I don't particularly think that the look of your clothing or camo or not camo is going to affect your success as much as other factors will. So I did wear camo just because I wore camo pants because that's what I just had when we went to Utah. I honestly don't know what name brand it is, but it's cool because it's got like inserts for the knee pads. So if you're on your knees, that's nice. But I wore camo pants, and the rest was just clothes I already had. Winter clothes, layers, base layers. I had a big red Patagonia jacket, so that's what I wore.
Perfect. Yeah. Don't need camo to see and kill deer. That's
absolutely not
a thing that the marketing. I mean, as someone who likes camo, it's mostly because I like the pattern. But even that, I still mismatch gear all the time. Like I'll wear Sitka pants and then a First Light jacket, or I think my puffy is North Face. I don't know. I have no problem mixing and matching gear. All right. So you use the gear that you could find, which is something that I'm a big fan of. Just don't let the gear be the thing that keeps you out of the woods. Now, from the shooting side, you mentioned that in the beginning, and I know Peter and I joked about this. You're using a muzzleloader and you're trying to do like MOA groups, man. And I'm not going to knock you for it. But how did you approach getting zeroed in and making sure you were comfortable shooting?
Yeah.
Because, like you said in the last podcast, anyone can shoot an MOA group from the bench, but can you do it when it matters?
Hmm.
And I think you took that a little overboard. But I'd
Yeah.
like to hear. I'd like to hear what your philosophy was, how you approached the shooting side of things.
Yeah. So you may think I took a little bit overboard, but like honestly, I by the time I left the range the last time, I was still like am like I was comfortable at 50, and I'll get to that. But I'm like, if it's past 50, am I going to be good? Like I still wasn't as comfortable as I wanted to be, but I wasn't. I was absolutely confident at 50, 55, 60 yards. So I wasn't going to let that hold me back. I was just kind of thinking, okay, well, if I'm not 100% confident at 100 yards, then I'll limit myself to where I am comfortable shooting. I'm not going to let that limit me from going out and doing the hunt because I'm like, oh, I got to go to the range one, two more times and get it perfect. I just kind of made my limit what I was comfortable with. But yeah, I did a couple trips to the range, and it started out great. I was getting better groups. I think I started zeroing at 100, which I don't know. I guess that's normal for regular centerfire rifles, but I think going back, that wasn't the best decision to start with that on my muzzleloader, especially being my first time zeroing a rifle by myself. So that I was getting a little bit better, getting better groups. Still not amazing groups, but better. And then
Can we define what a good group is, and what
it
kind of
was
groups are you shooting for?
it was in like the kill zone, so they were maybe like a 2 or 3 inch group at 100 yards. So it was, as far as the target went, it was definitely in the kill zone for a deer for sure. But like every once in a while, there'd be like an outlier that's way out, and I don't know, like, okay, is this me? Is this the gun? Is this just have I not gotten good enough yet where I can't control every shot to put it where I want it? So I was like, okay, let me bring it back down to 50, get comfortable there, and then bring it back up to 100 to see how I can do. Now, this is across multiple trips. And what also helped me was there were actually other hunters there that were using muzzleloaders as well. And I was kind of watching their process because you've never shot a muzzleloader. Peter hasn't either. So there's only so much I could ask from you about just the basics of firearms. But when it came to like specific processes, I couldn't lean on you guys for that. So I was just kind of watching and talking with some of the guys at the range. And I think that helped me improve my process. One of the things I noticed pretty early on is that I didn't have a good enough routine for like cleaning the board between shots, and it took a while to do that. I think I read somewhere you could go like 3 shots between cleaning, and then every third shot you clean, and then eventually as I started shooting more and more, I realized you kind of do have to do it a little bit more often, because there were times I realized where I was like pushing the bullet and the powder down the muzzle, and like I kind of marked the ramrod of where it should land when it's fully seated, and like shot 3 wasn't landing there, and it was basically because like the muzzle was fouled up and it couldn't kind of get all the way in. And there was one shot I took where I literally felt the difference between when I pulled the trigger. There was like a delay that I could hear between when like the powder caught fire and the bullet went out. So it took that moment. I was like, okay, maybe I got to find a better process. I watched the other guys there. I actually got a really good recommendation on a different brand of powder that I was actually looking for the first time I went to the store, but they were out of it. So I'm like, I'll just get whatever they have on the shelf. But then after seeing this one other hunter and talking with him, he did convince me to go back and pick up the IMR White Hots, which is what I wanted in the first place. So that was like another change. Halfway through sighting in a rifle, I get a new powder, which you basically have to kind of start from zero all over again. But I am glad I made that change. So where I kind of really got serious and started having better results was when I stuck with the IMR White Hots, which is the powder I wanted. Didn't change the bullet. The bullet was the same, and then I started at 50. So I was already pretty good with the previous powder. I just had to make slight adjustments once I changed the powder. And then by the end of everything at 50, I was literally all 3 shots were touching. I think shots 1 and 2 went basically through the same hole on the target. So it was such a nice group and right on the bullseye, like dead on the bullseye. I think when I sent you that picture, I was super happy. I was really proud of it. So like, that group at 50 was the last day before I, actually went out to do the hunt. And the group at 50 was super solid. I was super comfortable. And then I think with my last couple bullets of the day, I'm like, let me put this out to 100. And then again at 100, I was like, not quite happy with that because there was just so much variation. So I just told myself, all right, it's the end of the day. I'm the last one here. I'm just going to stick with 50 because I'm comfortable at 50, and that'll be what I use for the season.
I just have to say, at 50, with 3 shots touching, I would be impressed with most people doing that with a center fire rifle. So, and like, you know how I shoot. I want to have bullets touching at like 200 yards with my rifles. But most people, like the average hunter, isn't going to do that. Most people, the deal. You throw the paper plate up. If you can hit it, you're good. So your goal was to shoot as tight as possible, like literally 3 bullets touching at 50 with like a $500 muzzleloader. You're shooting the CVA Optima V2 nitride, right?
Yes. Yep, that's what I'm doing. And the real reason behind it isn't like I don't want to show off and I want to get these amazing groups. Like that is just a way for me to guarantee that I can get an ethical kill. Like that is my goal. That's what I'm going for. I don't want to wound an animal or anything like that. Like I'm going for the ethical kill, and that's my reason of why I want it to be as comfortable as I got.
100%. And that's how it should be. I think everyone should do that. What I was just saying was most people don't do that. I do it for the same reason. I want my groups to be as tight as possible because your group's going to expand when you're out there and you have adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
Like even now when I'm calm, I'm sure that my groups are calmer, I should say. I'm sure my groups open up when I'm shooting at an animal. It's nature. And especially for your first one, that's adrenaline and an adrenaline dump that we'll get to later in the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised myself that I got a group that tight. Honestly, I was very happy with it, but not at all expecting it.
I mean, I don't think I would have expected that for myself. When I get my muzzleloader, I've accepted, and we can talk about this more on the muzzleloader specific podcast. I'm also going to go CVA. I want to do the Optima MRX, I think as it is. Yeah. It's the shorter barrel, but it's the Bergara barrel, and I really want that barrel because my philosophy is going to be I want one that I'm not worried about upgrading later. I'd rather spend the extra money and like be done with it. So, all right. At this point, we've talked about gear. You used the gear that you had. You didn't go out of your way to buy anything special. As far as the actual hunting equipment, you used my leftover stand. You bought a new harness. You have the CVA rifle. We covered your shooting prep. What about scouting? So I know you couldn't really get in super early to do a lot of scouting. So you picked your place. What was your actual scouting like? How did you look for animals? Like, were you doing in-season scouting? I don't think you used trail cameras. Let's talk about scouting.
Sure. So the first time I went scouting was basically when I had decided, okay, like I'm going to be hunting this season. These are the 4 available lots to me. And let me go and check out which one I want to like put in for when it comes to submit my application. I went to all 4. One was garbage. Didn't want to even consider that one. There were 2 that I was like pretty happy with. And then the one I ended up actually choosing was the last one I went to that day and ended up being my favorite. It was a really nice chunk of land that had a lot of features that I think would hold deer. It's got a change of landscape from a big open field to a densely wooded field or dense woods. It has like 2 creeks running through it. So you have that habitat change. You have a water source. I did notice there's like tall grasses where I saw some beds. I didn't scout too much into the woods until mid-season, which I'll talk about in a bit. But like on that initial scout, I basically went from the parking lot through like the big open field area, walked like along the tree line, kind of around that whole area. I did see some deer sign. I saw some dropping, so that was good. I saw what I assumed were beds, which I'm pretty sure they were. So I saw like some of that, which, gave me confidence. And then the next time I went out, basically, was when I was setting up the tree stand. So that day was interesting because I had like a vague idea of where I wanted to put the tree stand from my last time out there. and then also like a map of the land that I was looking on. So once I actually go out, I'm like, I kind of wanted to go on the northern side of the property, right near where the trees and the field meet, and kind of facing out towards the field. So I get up to that corner that I was looking at, and there's not really a great tree to put the stand up in that kind of faces in the direction that I want. So I basically just like I dragged the stand, from the parking lot to up there, which is about a half mile. And then I kind of like just drop it there. I walk, a couple hundred feet in each direction, look around. I'm like, okay, I think this is like a suitable candidate. It was maybe 100 yards south of the corner where I was looking at before. So I found that tree. I'm like, all right, this looks like it could work. Drag the stand over. I only set the stand up once before, basically in my backyard in a tree. I did like 1 or 2 sits in my backyard just to like, am I comfortable 16 feet up here? And like, how am I going to climb up there with the rifle and with the shooting stick and all that kind of stuff? But I picked the tree, got it up there, set the harness up, all that kind of stuff, and then other than that, like I didn't really do much scouting. My one thing that kind of ended up being a mistake was I didn't consider wind like at all in my calculations and my calculus of what I'm going to do, which turns out not to be the greatest idea. The stand was kind of on a north-south line, like the trees run north-south, and then I was facing directly east. So like I know in the morning that the sun's going to be kind of rising from that side, going kind of in my face. But I didn't know that there's easterly winds as well. They're blowing east to west, so basically blowing me deeper into the woods. That's not something that I checked at all. I really honestly, as a first time hunter, just didn't consider that as part of my preparation, which is my mistake. There was a couple times, after a couple times going out to sit and not really having any success and not seeing any deer. There was one morning where I got there in the morning, sat for a couple hours. I'm like, all right, well nothing's happening. I was like thinking of going home, and then I get down. I'm like, you know what? Let me just drop everything off in the car. Let me just walk around for a little bit. Turned into 2.5 hours of just walking the land, in the woods, in the field. Yeah, and my wife's like, "Are you coming home?" I'm like, I thought you said like you were calling it a day, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I just decided to walk around."
Yeah, been there.
But that ended up being one of like the best exercises and things that I did, because that's when I pulled out Onyx, as I was talking with you and Peter, and I started marking different sign that I saw. This was the first time that I saw like a sign of other actual hunters, because I walked around and I found 4 other tree stands. I saw one guy that had like a little, basically like a kitchen dish that he put some kind of bait, I don't know if it was food or whatever, some bait in there. And then he had a direct eye line from his tree stand. So like I got to see some things that other hunters were doing. I got to see a lot of sign, and it kind of did a good thing for me because it confirmed that my location, I think, was a good location. Right along that line, going north-south along the tree line, there must have been like 6 or 7 piles of droppings. I'm like, okay, they definitely do travel right up and down here for sure, because there's a lot of sign here. And then seeing a lot of tree stands deeper in the woods confirmed that, yeah, deer do hang out there. There's others, hunters that have stands set up here, trail cams set up here. So there definitely are deer in those woods. I just had to hope that my calculation was correct, that sometimes those deer go out into the field, or travel along that field woods barrier. So that scouting day actually did end up being really helpful. I found at least one other spot that I'm like, you know what? If I don't have success here for a couple more tries, I think I'm going to try to move my stand to one of these other spots. So all in all, that day like started off kind of not feeling to be the greatest day, but then making the best of it and turning that day into a scouting day instead, I think definitely helped me out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, one of the things that looking back on my very first season when I was trying to figure it out, one of the things that I took advantage of were observation sits. I picked it up from Mark Kenyon on the Wired to Hunt podcast, but I would do sits, and I wouldn't necessarily care if I was going to get anything, but I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to see for a distance so I could figure out where the animals were. And those were really beneficial in season scouting or just scouting in general is incredibly helpful to know if you're in the right spot. The wind, as Peter and I talked to you about, I feel like probably too much towards the end was like you got to consider the wind from your approach to where you're sitting, morning and evening. It's incredibly important. You did not use trail cameras, right? You had no trail cameras, so
I
everything
did
you did
not.
was on your eyes or from your
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah. I considered looking into some, towards the end of the season, but I did not actually end up using trail cams now.
Nice. All right. So you're scouting. You didn't really scout before the season started. So let's talk about the hunting season. How did it get
Yeah,
started? How many sits did you do? Mornings, evenings? What
yeah.
kind of stuff you got there?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It definitely was a late season hunt for me. The season, I think generally, the first season for bow starts in New Jersey in like early September, early mid September. I didn't even go to Peters to pick up my tree stand till probably second week of November. So there's a lot of time that I could have been out there, but wasn't. So yeah, met up with Peter, picked up the tree stand, brought that home, set it up at home just to get comfortable with it. By the time like all my gear came in, by the time I had time to go out in the field and set it up, honestly, I think it was after Thanksgiving that I even got it set up, and then I think the first time I went to like, all right, I'm gonna go do a sit and start this hunt was maybe it was after the 6 day firearm season, which is December 5th and that whole week. So it must have been like December 11th or 12th was like the first time that I went out, like I'm going hunting now. So, for me, that was my first time. I guess a lot of people consider that like super late season, but that was my first time. It was unseasonably warm, I think, for the first couple of times I went out. Um, nice like 45, 50-degree day. It was really, really nice to be out there, just like having a singular focus, being like paying attention to every sound, paying attention to um, everything around you, kind of really being present in nature and all that. It was really nice. My first couple times were all like that. I did get up early, went in the morning. I think it's half hour before sunrise is when legal light starts. I probably got in my tree stand, 10 minutes after legal light because I am slow in the morning, as you know. um,
Yes, yes, I do.
so, it must have been closer to actual sunrise, maybe 10, 15 minutes before. Um, but, those first couple of times were helpful for me to like set up my routine of, okay, get in the parking lot, get all my gear out, load the rifle, walk into, do the half-mile walk to the spot, get up in the tree, do all that, figure out like, I have this rifle, I have a shooting stick, and then like I brought like a small backpack that has like water and my kill kit, like a bunch of other stuff like down there. So I ended up like having to figure out a system of like how I'm gonna, just have all my gear laid out around me and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up having like a string and a clip that like I held um the shooting stick on, and coming up with my system. And those first couple times out there really did help me kind of lock that in, and getting those reps in. The same way, going out to the range and getting reps in there is super helpful. That this was kind of building that as well. So yeah, my first couple times were like that. That first day, I did do full morning. I went back to the car. Oh, yeah, did the full morning. Then I went back home for like lunch for like an hour or something, hour and a half, and went back for like an evening sit. So I was out there probably from sunrise to 11:30, and then like 1 to sunset, which was cool being out there for the whole day. Like I got to sit in the tree. It was nice and clear. Got to literally watch the fog roll in, and like everything in front of me just went gray. And then seeing the fog roll out and the sun come back, like I got to see that in full real time, which is super cool. It's not something that anyone like really experiences unless you just spend that many hours consecutively just out in nature, which is awesome. Yeah, my first couple times were like that. I'd go out in the morning, not see anything. Saw a lot of squirrels that annoyed me because I'm like, oh, sound, what's that? And it's a squirrel. And I like squirrels too, but they were pissing me off those days. Um, so that's how that kind of went. And then we ended up having some days where, for whatever reason, I couldn't do the morning. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna not go out just because I couldn't do the whole day. Like, let me go do a couple evening sits. So I did that a couple times. I'd do whatever I had to do in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd go out from 3 to 5 or 2 to 5. Just sit out there, just to be out there and hopefully get some chances, opportunities. That didn't really happen for a while, but I kept going out there, until one very cold, snowy, rainy day. I did have an opportunity. If we want to get into that,
Let's hold off for now. We'll get
sure.
there. So you're going through these sits and you're not seeing anything. Did you ever run into other hunters, or is it you solo the entire time?
I was solo the entire time. I did, like I said, during that mid-season scouting thing, I did see other hunter stands. I think the conclusion I came to is that this property has two entrances, which I didn't even know until. Oh, I did know. Technically, the map did have a two parking lots mentioned on it, but I never explored it from the other side until that one scouting trip where I walked the whole property. I'm assuming that based on location of the stands, most other hunters use the other side of the property. So even if we were out at the same time, I think they may have been deeper into the woods to the point where I didn't see them, because I never saw any cars in the parking lot on my end, nor did I see any hunters or run into anyone in the area of the property that I was on.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I only ever hunted archery seasons in New Jersey, and I saw someone every day. They weren't
Mm.
necessarily within eyesight when I was hunting, but I would run into someone at the parking lot every single day. How big was this piece? I don't think we actually talked about that. How big was the property?
I have to go back and double check, but it's over, I would say, 10 acres for sure. It's a decent chunk of land. I'll go back and take a look at it, but it was from my opinion, it's nothing like out west. But for New
Yeah.
Jersey, which is a very dense residential state, having 10, 12 acres that's dedicated just to hunting, and that, I think is a pretty decent chunk of land here.
I thought it was bigger than that. I thought it was
It
like
probably is.
50 or 100 acres or something.
I don't think it's 100, but I think 10 or 12 might be underestimating it.
Okay.
I'll look at the map after this, and I'll send it to you if you want to update it in the show notes or something.
Yeah, I'll throw a little subtitle for the people watching this on YouTube or Spotify
Yeah.
video, and then I'll throw it in the show notes. So you didn't run into other hunters. How many permits were on this property for muzzleloader hunting?
So this property had, I think, like maybe 10 permits total, and that's between muzzleloader and bow. I think for muzzleloader it was limited, like out of all those 10 or 11, I think 4 or 5 were designated muzzleloader, so not a lot.
So you're not running into other hunters, which is good, but you're also
Mhm.
not seeing anything.
Yeah.
How did you stay motivated to keep going back out and trying, especially sitting all day like that when you're not
hmm
seeing anything?
Yeah. I think it's a matter of a couple things. One is trusting trusting or and figuring out that you've made the right choice of location based on the scouting you've done and all that, which is why, like, that one day that I ended up scouting more than hunting, I was losing confidence in the location, the spot where I set up. So I was, that's when I went to walk around and I found the sign and I found all that, and I'm like, okay, I'm confident that they are around. So then once I confirmed that, I had confidence that, yeah, my spot is a good spot, I just have to kind of persevere. Then became a matter of, like, trusting the process, really understanding, like, yes, I've made this choice. It's almost like inevitable that they'll show up as long as the correct factors are there. If you're there at sunrise, if you're there at sunset when they're most active, if there's weather patterns coming in that's making them travel and move more, search for food more, if you're playing those factors and you're in a spot that you have confidence in, I think it basically becomes a matter of time before you have an interaction with deer, before you see some out there. And that's kind of what I was telling myself. I knew that it was a good spot, and I was just waiting for the chance that they show up. And I think that trusting the process is a big part of it.
So you found the sign and you're sitting on the edge of a tree line, right? So you're kind of on that edge habitat, and you're primarily doing morning. So what you're hoping to catch them going from bedding to feed in the morning, is that kind of what
Mm-hmm.
your general plan was? Was there any food that you were aware of? I'm not the best woodsman in the world, so I'm not
Yeah.
someone that can really say much about that. But was there anything in particular that you were looking for, or were you just looking at the topography and you're like, this looks like a good spot? Because that's how I did it in the beginning. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I still kind of do that.
Yeah. I definitely wasn't looking at like, oh, what food source do they have here? I was operating on the I know deer like edge habitat thing. So yeah, I was playing that more so than a specific food source. I did notice that there were some people baiting, and baiting is legal in New Jersey, so that's not a problem. But I didn't want to do that at all because I'm a big believer in like fair chase and stuff. So that's not really some fair chase from a tree stand, which kind of sounds ridiculous as it is. But I didn't really want to go the baiting route because of that philosophy. So that was something I was kind of against. I really was just playing the habitat, playing the behaviors that deer tend to exhibit. Being active in the mornings, being active in the evenings, liking of edge habitat. That's the kind of stuff that I was hoping to use to my advantage.
Yeah. Not that I want to go down the philosophical rabbit hole of baiting and whatever. Over the years, my position has changed on this, and I still prefer going the more difficult route, is how I'm going to call it. It's a lot
Mm-hmm.
harder if you're not using something to lure them in, and like no one can deny that it's harder.
Yeah.
But from a wildlife management standpoint, it makes sense in some scenarios for certain species. Like one of the problems New Jersey has is there's just too many deer. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's too many. It's
Yeah.
of every state that I've ever hunted, New Jersey has the most liberal bag limits. 2 does a day throughout the entirety of the season. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you hunt every weapon type in every season, you can take $5 a year. I mean, it is insane the amount of deer that you could take in the state of New Jersey. There's too many of them. And I think that's one of the reasons why baiting is permitted, because there are so many, but it's an
Mm-hmm.
elective choice. You don't have to do it. In states like Arkansas, I know Clay Newcomb talks about how they bait bears, and it's like you're not going to find a bear if you don't do it, but there's too many of them. You need to find a
Yeah.
way of luring them in. So bears, dogs, like as I've grown as a hunter and I've learned more, I am more interested in learning more about these different
Right. Right. Right.
styles of conservation. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's up to me, especially if I'm going to do tree stand hunting or whatever, um, I'd prefer not to do corn or any other bait. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't discount the benefit of it as a conservation and wildlife management tool. But anyway, not that I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So, all right, at this point, we've covered your scouting, your philosophy about shooting and preparation. We've talked about gear. You've done a bunch of sits. You've told yourself that you got to trust the process. This is a good area. You have found sign. They're going to show up eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about eventually coming. So let's talk
Yes.
about the day of your actual hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually a little bit ironic that we were just talking about baiting and my philosophy on that. I think that kind of changes inversely to how successful your season is, which is kind of what happened to me. Because that day I was like, you know what? I saw two other tree stands that had some kind of food bait set up. So I think I literally had like a bag of apples, like maybe 10, 12 apples. I'm like, I'm just going to set this out kind of in front of my stand within rifle range, where I'm comfortable at. Put it there and see what happens. So that morning, I get to my tree stand, drop everything off, go 30 yards out, drop a bunch of apples, and then get back in my stand and continue the hunt. This day was the first major storm that we had in Jersey for this winter. It started off as snow, like it was below freezing, snow in the morning, and then like mid afternoon changed to like sleet, freezing rain combination. All the other hits I mentioned earlier, it was like unseasonably warm, 45, 50 degrees. This one was like the first one where I'm like, okay, this is cold and I'm feeling this. I get there, get set up. The wind is blowing snow right in my face. That morning, I actually forgot my gloves in the car, so I'm like, this is just miserable. Most of the days, I'm not proud to say, but there was some times where I'm like, this is slow. I just like scroll on Instagram. I tried to keep it to like hunting content, so at least it's something related.
Okay.
But there were a couple of times I'm like, oh, I have 5 minutes. Let me just scroll, and then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I have to be out here.
Let me tell you how many times I've done that, and I look up and I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck, there's a deer.
Yeah. This day was so cold that my phone was in my pocket the whole time because like I had to keep my hands in my pocket. I had to sometimes kept my hand like in front of my my bino harness just to like keep them warm because I left my gloves in the car. There were plenty of times where I stood up on my platform and just turned around and faced a tree, so that like the wind wasn't just like raining down on me and snow and all that. So it was miserable to say the least. At the same time, though, looking back into like getting up and putting my face away from the wind gave me an opportunity to look deeper into the woods. So, like my back was to the field and my face was looking into the woods to kind of explore that a little bit more, which I did most days. I would stand up, look around, look in the corners, look around for a little bit. This particular day, the deer that I did see were from that side, and I'll get to that in a second. Basically, after a couple hours that morning, I'm like, this is miserable. I need to go to the car to warm up and get my gloves. So I do that, go to my car. I sit there for like 5 minutes, just blasting, maybe 10 or 15, and they just like warm up, dry off because I'm like soaking wet. I get my gloves, get warmed up, and then I head back out. So I may be in the car for 15 minutes. And then I get back out there. At this point, the snow is like transitioning into like freezing rain, sleet, which is somehow more miserable. Get back in the stand, and so we're talking about the wind. The wind is still an easterly wind coming at my face, so most of the time I'm facing into the woods, which is west. And what happens is the way the parking lot is south and east of where I'm coming in. So like as I walk in, the wind's blowing east, blowing me into the southern part of the woods, and then I walk like a little bit north and into my tree stand. So north of my tree stand hasn't really been blown out because I haven't went there. It's just west of my tree stand. These group of deer that I see, they come in from north of my tree stand. So must have been in that area of the woods that didn't get blown out, thankfully. So yeah, to get into this part of the hunt where, for the first time, I'm like, oh man, I have like adrenaline. This is exciting. Like my first time seeing deer, after multiple days and hours of sitting, I'm like, oh man, this is go time. So it's like already past sunset. Legal light is half hour past sunset. I might be 10 minutes past sunset right now. So it's already getting dark on a snowy, rainy day. And I hear something, I look over, and there must have been I think at first I saw like 4, 5, 6 deer in a group, and they were north of the tree stand and walking south, kind of towards my stand, but about 40, 50, 60 yards west of me. So then I'm like, in my head this whole time, I'm thinking like, okay, well, if I see a deer, like, what's going to be my process of like seeing deer? What's the next step? Like, what do I do from there to like get ready to actually, take a shot? I had my hat on, I had earplugs in my hat, I had my gloves on. So I'm like, okay, take the gloves off. One of them falls down into the snow. Then I take the earplugs, throw those in, and then I'm like, what do I got to do? I haven't had to practice this part yet. I thought I was going to use, if I was shooting straight in front of me into the field, I was going to use a shooting stick. But the way the deer were, that wasn't an option because they're like kind of behind me. Then I have to like open up my bino harness, take out my rangefinder to like see how far away they are. I think I ranged them at like 63, 65, somewhere in that range. And I didn't realize this until like later on, but from when I ranged them until later on in the hunt, like they moved, and I didn't rearrange them. By the time I had one in my scope, so I was like, I can estimate how far away it was, but I don't exactly know. So this group is there, and they're kind of like walking around feeding, and they're slowly walking south. So get everything prepped. I'm turned around. I have to like find a spot where I'm comfortable. So I basically like get on my knees on the foot platform of the tree stand. and then like I'm resting my hands and elbows on the seat of the platform, and I'd already ranged them. I think they're at like 60, 65, and they're walking. I think a little bit. They're walking kind of closer towards me. So there's this group of 2 trees, and these deer are going between these 2 trees as they're kind of traveling, and all of them are going one by one, and like one other deer kind of went off to a different direction. And by the time I kind of got set, got positioned, got my scope kind of sighted in, and got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm looking through my scope and I'm kind of getting comfortable. I'm trying to pick out and find a deer. They're all moving slowly, but they're moving. And then there was one that was like off somewhere else, and it seemed like, he's like, oh, I got to go catch up with everyone else. They're all going that way. So he turns around and starts moving that direction. I didn't see any more deer passing. Like this might have been the last one of that group. All the other ones had already went further south and were kind of like out of range from where I was sitting. So this is the last one. And I basically had my sight set between those 2 trees, assuming every other deer went through that path. This one's going to follow. And he did. He went right through there. At this point, I'm like hoping that he just like stops still. When I'm at the range, like, you and I haven't spent that much time in the range together, but I would stay in my scope for sometimes 30, 40 seconds if that's what I needed to get comfortable to get the good shot. So when I got that group that was, a 1-inch group, I may have sat there for 30 seconds for each shot to get myself to the point where like, yep, I'm taking the shot. But this time, there's a little bit more urgency. But yeah, deer walks in, kind of stops between those two trees. I get it lined up in my scope. Honestly, up until that deer walked in, I forgot that I even had zoom on my scope. I was like zoomed all the way out. Totally forgot that was an option. So between when all the deer passed and this one was coming up, I'm like, oh wait, I could actually turn this. I zoom in like, I think it had I think mine went up to like 10 times magnification. I think I put it at like 5 or 6, so like half of it. And then deer walks in, stops kind of right between those trees where I was aiming. Hands are freezing cold, just like wet, cold, not comfortable. And I had definitely never shot in these kinds of conditions before. But the moment presented itself, we walked right into, his crosshairs, right in the vitals, stopped there for a bit and, took the shot. And I was like, whoa, I just took a shot. What's going on? And this deer runs right towards me, like almost gonna hit my tree stand. So I'm like, okay, I think I hit it. That's good. What's happening now? Runs right towards me, so like 50 yards towards me, and falls into a ditch and dies 4 feet from my tree stand. 4 feet away, just expires right there. I'm like, okay, I think that was a good shot. He's not moving. I'm literally looking for my tree stand. He's right down there. I'm like,
you throw a rock at him?
I could have spit on him. Yeah, it was so close. And everything just going through my head, like, this just happened. I just did this. Like, that deer is down.
Oh, man.
What's going on? It was a wild moment. Like, the adrenaline honestly really helped because it was cold and freezing. So that definitely helped me. But yeah, it was an absolutely wild moment. There was a lot of like emotion of pride, of happiness, of like honestly even confusion for a bit of like, did this just happen? Is it like is it actually dead? Like, did I injure it? Like, and so fast too. It happened so fast, which is something I'm sure a lot of hunters say about their first opportunity. But yeah, it happened so quickly, even though those deer are probably hanging out for a minute or two from like start to end. But in my head, it must have been 10 seconds. It went so fast. But that was absolutely wild.
Well, first, I just want to congratulate you again. I was ecstatic getting that text message. Like, year made. I don't need to fill any more tags. I'm good. I obviously want to fill more tags, but I don't know how long I've been trying to convince you to start hunting, and like you came on that trip with us back in 2020 to Utah, and to see it come full circle for you to be able to get your first year on your own, your first season in very difficult conditions. I mean, you're hunting a small piece of public land with a muzzleloader, DIY, no bait in a state where people religiously use bait. And you're doing all of that late season in the snow, in the sleet, with wind. And it's just, you persevered in some pretty difficult situations as far as whitetail hunting is concerned. And it's going to sound cheesy, but I'm like super proud of you too, because it's not easy. Like, it takes a special person to be able to go through that without support there. And I mean, Peter and I try to help, but I live in Texas and he lives in PA, or like 2 something hours away. It's not easy for either of us to actually help you. So, man, just congratulations. I'm so happy that this was able to happen, that you're able to find success. It's just everything that I've wanted. Like, it's so great.
It felt so good. It still feels unreal at times. I mean, you guys were a great help. At the end of the day, it was on me to like do the execution part of it, but like the support was there, the advice was there for sure. You know, like so many nights of just texting back and forth about questions and this and that, and that was super helpful. But yeah, like that moment was unreal. And then afterwards, like I was dead cold, so I leave the deer there. I go back to my car, and by the time I get to my car, it's like basically pitch black. I get back to my car, I warm up, and that's when I sent the text. So it was probably 15 minutes after all this happened. That's when I sent a text to you and Peter. I think you actually may have been out on a hunt as well at the same exact time, which is kind of cool. I saw your Instagram post. That was a pretty wild day for you also. Yeah, I get back to the car. That's when I text you and Peter, warm up myself because I'm freezing cold. That's when I have to call it in. So I call it into the state, get all that stuff done. And then I'm like, okay, now it's still freezing rain. It's pitch black. It's almost 6 o'clock. I'm a half mile from this deer, and I have to like field dress this for the first time by myself, get it to my car by myself, get it home. Like, as difficult as it was to get to that step, it's like the hard part only starts now, But it was an absolutely wild experience. I definitely have the bug now, which I'm sure everyone that does this has that feeling. But it really, really is so exciting to go through all that. It's really that type 2 kind of fun where in the moment you're miserable, but then I have moments like this reminiscing about it, and I'm just warm inside. It's super nice.
I'm warm inside as a spectator.
Yeah.
Like just hearing about it makes me happy. Did you get the shakes
Absolutely.
after the shot? Did you have that adrenaline?
I don't know if the shakes were from temperature or from that. Could have been either one, but it was honestly. So one thing that I vividly remember is like, so it ran towards me. I at one point I thought it was gonna like literally run into my tree stand. So thanks for that safety harness, but it didn't. It felt like a couple yards away, and I definitely didn't want to like go up to it right at first because it might like do like a false charge or something. You really just never know. So like for a minute there, I was scared to like come down from the tree stand. Like it was close enough where me coming down, that noise or something could have startled it, and I don't know, could have ran towards me, could have ran away, it could have done something. There was a period of time where I'm like, do I even climb down? Like, is it really dead? And looking at it, I'm like, no, it's down for sure. And yeah, no, I as soon as I came down, I went right to the car first, got all my kill kit, called it in, did all that stuff, and then I came back to actually, process it and field dress and all that. But yeah, that moment was pretty interesting because I'm like, I don't even want to come down right now because I'm not sure if that's the best move.
Yeah, even today, I never assume they're down. I always approach them from behind and poke them. Or if I'm using my bow, I'll usually like stand back and kick them. But I never come from the front. It was like, not to talk about, like, the most scary one for me was the elk, because I'm like, if this thing's not dead and it just moves its head a little bit, I'm in trouble. So that doesn't go away. I think you did the right thing. So how humbling was the drag out? You dragged it. I know you dragged it because you had it hanging in your garage. How humbling is it to drag a deer out of the woods?
Yeah, it was. You always talk about being mountain fit or fit or whatever. I was good for about 2/3 of the way. Basically, my plan was, so I don't have a pickup truck. I have just a regular SUV. So I
forgot about this.
Yeah, so that's a whole thing. I'll tell you about that part now, which I don't think we've talked about yet. I dragged it about 2/3 of the way, just like grabbed it by its antlers, I mean, this is after I field dressed and all that. Dragged it about 2/3 of the way until I'm like almost back in my car. And I'm like, it's a slight incline. Honestly, it's not a big incline, but it was an incline, and I already dragged it for, 2/3 of half a mile. I'm not going to math that now, but a while. And I'm like, you know what? I realized earlier that day, and this should have been a sign. Earlier that day when I'm in the tree stand, like everything I bring on a day of hunting is usually in my car. I forgot one item. And the one item I forgot was a tarp. Because my plan was, I'm going to get this thing, I'm going to put it on the tarp, and then like drag it into my car, and like the tarp will be the protective layer, or I can drag it on the tarp. That'll help me, and all that kind of stuff. That day I forgot the tarp. And I noticed it when I was in the tree stand earlier in the day. I'm like, I forgot the tarp. This is, if I get the deer today, this is going to suck. And of course, that's the day that I get the deer. So I get it most of the way to the car, drive home, pick up the tarp, come back, and then I do the rest of the drag to the car. Honestly, if I had gotten a doe, I don't know how I would have gotten it into the car. But basically, I got it onto the tarp right by my car, got its like head and antlers into the car, and like put both my feet inside the like kind of like behind the taillights, and then just dragged the whole thing on. And that worked. I didn't get any blood anywhere in the car. Tarp did its job, covered it up. Honestly, if I got pulled over that day, it would have been the weirdest thing. Just a fully gutted deer in the back of a car. There's a muzzle loader in its case over here. I have like so many knives covered in blood. It was a weird thing. But plows were out everywhere, plowing the road for me, so I actually got stuck behind a plow going home that day. But yeah, got it home, and that's also when I realized, how am I going to hang this thing to actually do all that? But I found like a chain that I could harness in my rafters and got all that done. But yeah, very humbling process. I definitely have things that I can improve on for next year, both in terms of fitness and in terms of like maybe get some kind of like trailer hitch where I could attach something to the back of my car so that I don't have to drag it all the way inside, or there's things that ideas I have for improving that. But physical fitness is definitely part of it. That's probably why after dragging it most of the way, I'm like, I'm gonna go drive and then come back because I need to rest for a little bit. That half mile walk usually takes me about 9 minutes. When I'm just doing my regular gear, and it must have been close to almost 20 with dragging the deer. So and the dark doesn't help either.
No, darkness definitely does not help.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about lessons learned and things like that. But so you butchered it yourself, right? How was that?
Yes, that was the skinning and the butchering process was not something that I could have practiced before. So like the shooting part I can practice. I'm comfortable with heights and sitting in a tree stand, and after a couple sits, like I'm used to that. The butchering's not, and field dressing is not really something you can practice until you're in that moment. YouTube videos, I watched a lot of those about field dressing, and I think I picked really good gear, but until you have that deer and you're like, well, I got to get like, I can't not go through with this now. Like the deer's here, I have to find a way to gut this thing. I have to find a way to get it home and do all that. You don't really have an option not to, but it was very interesting. Like watching a video about how to gut it, and then like, okay, well now I'm in here doing this, and like, oh yeah, that's the diaphragm they all cut around, and like, oh yeah, those are the organs. Let's like make sure you don't pierce those as you're cutting, and cut up instead of into the animal. Like all those things start kind of materializing. But there's other things that are just like harder than you imagine, like reaching up to get the esophagus and to cut up there. Like it's not easy. Some of it you're doing blind, some of it's so slippery. It's harder than you imagine just watching the videos. Because a lot of times you're watching people who have done it a lot of times. Ronello's done it a bunch. The bearded butchers have done it a bunch. Like these guys know what they're doing, which makes it look easy, but it's not easy. It's hard. That part's tough. And then skinning it, making sure you don't like cut into the meat, you don't get hair everywhere. That also not easy. That part I think was one of the biggest challenges. My setup that I had, how the deer was hanging in my garage when I was skinning it, was not ideal, and I definitely learned some things that I want to do better next time. So a lot of lessons learned there. I wish I could have had it higher up, because like once I got kind of halfway down the body, I couldn't raise the deer higher. I just had to like get myself lower on the ground and use some leverage to pull it all away. But all in all, it is super rewarding. I have a whole bunch of meat in my freezer. My wife likes it. I like it. Our cat likes it. I fed my cat venison and the cat's enjoying it. So, we're going to be eating good for a long time. And, I have a skill and a passion that I like now. So it is really rewarding overall.
Awesome. So you've talked, sort of alluded to this a couple of times now. Lots of lessons learned. What do you think are some of the top things that you learned? Things that maybe you would have done differently or plan to do next season?
Yeah. So lessons learned. I would say one is definitely get as comfortable as you can with your weapon, whether it's a bow, whether it's a rifle, a muzzleloader. I don't know that I would have taken that shot if I hadn't gotten super comfortable with my muzzleloader over the many months that I would go out to the range, cleaning it, taking it apart. This is something that if you're grew up around firearms your whole life, you understand. I'm not that guy. This all comes from you and you sharing firearms with me and the hunting trip we did, like that a lot of that I learned from you and from Peter and from others as well. But learning the weapon really well helps you have that confidence that when it comes time, when you're in the moment, that it's gonna act the way you expect it to act. All the times that I was at the range and the bullet didn't seat right, and then I had to learn, you have to clean it more. You have to clean it between each time, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna clean it after every bullet, and you do that, and it's just like super hard to clean. So you have to find the correct method to get the ramrod in there and clean it out and get that rhythm. And then, you take it home, take it apart, clean all the pieces, know how they work, all that. And then by the last couple of times I'm at the range, it was no longer like tweaking. It was just executing repetition. I already had the method down. It was just at that point getting the reps in. So learn your weapon, learn it well, get super comfortable with it so that when this is something you said before and that I was kind of a mantra for me, and that's when you're in difficult situations, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. And that is what you really have to do. You have to make sure that your training and your expectations are that far apart. You have to make sure your training is as close to expectations as you can, so that when you do fall back on your training, it's really good. So that's part of it. Other lessons learned is definitely spend more time than I did on the scouting side of things. Learn I didn't go back to the land since the spring, and my hunt was in the winter. So I could have definitely spent more days and hours out there closer to when my season was. For me, I'm like, I don't have my tree stand yet. Why would I go out and do scouting? I had plans with Peter to go pick it up, but I didn't have it yet. So I didn't think, why would I go out there just to waste up a weekend to go out there and walk around? But had I done that, I may have noticed sign earlier. I may have decided to put my tree stand, more in the woods, closer to where they bed or something. I could have made some different choices, or at least learned more about this property prior to having a couple of frustrating sits where I didn't see anything. So definitely spend more time scouting. I know you and Peter talk about it all the time when you do Western hunts. You can't really scout on the ground, but you spend a lot of time e-scouting, and that is a part that I definitely want to improve on next year. Even if I end up going with the same chunk of land here, maybe I go to the same spot, maybe I don't, but I'll definitely want to spend more time exploring different areas of that same property. And then the other part is just for the part of dragging the deer out, physical fitness, and then having a better process of once I kind of get it home to do the butchering and all that. That's something that is kind of the least of my concerns. I was so laser focused on getting an opportunity and getting a deer, which I got, and I'm I'll make everything else happen. But then when I had to make everything else happen, it was tough. So now that I know that, yeah, the chances of this happening are higher. I've had success. I kind of know what I'm doing now. Going forward, I definitely want to work on my setup for all of that, so that it's cleaner, it's neater, it's easier on my back, all that stuff.
Hey, you progress over time. The important thing
Absolutely.
is getting the reps in and getting your deer. I mean, you had your opportunity.
Yeah.
You got that first deer. And now you have the opportunity to look back, see what could have been improved on, and then use that going forward. So your season's technically not over yet. Do you have plans of going out and trying to get a doe?
So here's one thing I want to touch on quickly about specifically my township. So we've been using the word hunting a lot, but you've alluded to how New Jersey we have like an overabundance of deer, like in terms of deer per square mile. It's way higher than what the land can naturally sustain, at least in my neck of the woods here. Our town has a deer management program. We don't have a hunting program. We don't have anything with the word hunting. It's a deer management program, and what their goals are and what they want is to manage does, and they incentivize taking does so that we can manage the population in this town. That's how they pitch it to the city council and all that, and that's how we stay in their good graces, is by managing the deer population here, and that's basically what it is. And I want to be a good steward of that program. I took this buck because it was the deer that I had an opportunity on and I had the tag for it. But I kind of wanted a doe to be the first deer I got, just so that I would be a good steward of the land and of the program, and be in their good graces. Not that I'm not, because I took a buck. It's legal and allowed. There's no issue with that. But I kind of want to go out at least a couple more times and hopefully go for another deer and a doe this time. Whether or not I'll be able to make that happen, we'll see. I do still have some time. I think the season goes at least till mid-February, if not the end of February. If I do go, I think this second time around, if I have success, I'll probably take it to a local butcher, just because I don't know that I'll have the time to do all that twice. And according to the email I got, this is the first time in years that we actually have a local butcher in town, which is nice. So if I do go again, that's the route I'll go. But I do want to go out at least a couple more times to see if I can get an opportunity on the doe to kind of get back to the program and live up to what their goals are.
Awesome. Yeah. Doe management is something that I've heard come up on a lot of podcasts recently. It is like and maybe social media is to blame for this, but we glorify bucks and like killing big bucks. And like my first deer, nothing special. Like he's I don't even know, 2.5-year-old 6-point. You got a spike. You would have taken anything, I'd imagine. And like, I would have taken anything. I really didn't care. I just wanted to get my first rep in so that I could learn and grow. And doe management is something that needs to get pushed more. I think we need to encourage people to be willing to take does, because in a healthy population, if you look at I don't want to call them studies. They're probably studies, but like deer population surveys, maybe. When you look at fawns, it's a 50-50 split of bucks and does. And yet, when you look, there's a lot more bucks taken than does, because hunters want the rack. And like, don't get me wrong, I love big bucks just as much as the next guy. Yeah. But I have no qualms about taking does. For all I care, I could take. I've got the pronghorn that's sitting behind me. I have this buck that I got with Carrie. I've got 2 more bucks that I have mounts. I have an elk. I have my axis deer. Like, I don't really care about having more mounts. It's not about that. I love having the meat, and I know that you do too. And being a good steward of the land, I could shoot those all day long. It's fine with me. No problems with that whatsoever. So if you're out there and you're just getting started, do not be ashamed of shooting a doe. And if you're on a Facebook group and someone talks crap about you shooting a doe, they're probably uneducated, don't know what they're talking about, and you should just ignore them. Honestly, you should. Like, I was talking to Carrie about this, and I was considering making my own Facebook community that is focused on emergent first-gen hunters, where we would have a blend of first-gen hunters and seasoned hunters who agree to abide by the rules. Like, no criticism, none of that stuff. Like, as long as it's legal and ethical,
have at it.
Go for it. No one should shame you for what you're doing. Now, if I'm going to shoot a buck, at this point, I'm going to try and be pickier. But if my freezer gets low, I'm not going to be so picky. It's legal. It's going down. But anyway, so
Yeah.
What are your hopes and aspirations for next season? So I know you're going to try and get out a few more times, but what are you looking at for the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah. So next season, I definitely want to continue what I'm doing. Get out there. Maybe this time around, I want to see if I can go do the 6-day muzzleloader season. It's a bit earlier in December. Honestly, maybe even the week of Thanksgiving tends to be pretty slow for me. I think by then the season has started for muzzleloader. So I think I'm gonna do more scouting. Try to get out a bit earlier, and then kind of two things. One is, as I've been thinking about this, I remember an episode of Meat Eater where Ranella was talking about, I forget what he calls it, but it's like the USA turkey tour where you have to get all 5 different species of turkey available in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also I don't know 5 or 6 species of deer in the U.S. So, whitetails, blacktails, mule deer, sika, all kinds of deer as well. And I remember, once again, Meat Eater, there's an episode where they do a sika deer hunt in Maryland. We both happen to have a friend in Maryland, so I'm thinking of seeing if I can find a way to do a sika deer muzzleloader hunt in Maryland. So that's something that I've just thought about, haven't explored too deeply yet, but that would be kind of cool to see if I can make that happen. And then yeah, I don't know Peter, what your plans are, but if there's a muzzleloader tag involved, I might tag myself along to that. So we'll see next year. Next season is a long ways away, but yeah, I think I'm gonna try to make that Maryland Seek and Deer hunt happen.
Yeah, I definitely want to try and get out and do that too. I haven't looked into it yet. As far as muzzleloaders go, I'm committed. I'm getting it this year at some point.
There you go.
I want to do. I was talking to Carrie. We have a late season muzzleloader hunt in Texas. It's 2 weeks, and he saves his doe tags, so you can get 2 does a year, and most of it's by county. So I think technically you could probably get more if you go and hunt in different counties. But for where he's at, you can take 2, and he saves those tags for the late season. And it was a different kind of hunt. He didn't hunt over feeders. He did patterning and like use the landscape. It's my kind of hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So he and I already talked about me going out and hunting with him for the late muzzleloader season 2025. It's just crazy to think about.
Nice.
So
yeah,
that's on the radar. When am I going to get you to go out west? Like, when are we going to get you to commit to applying, building points, and let's do this?
Yeah, I mean, we can absolutely start having that conversation. I'm happy to. I know that some Western. I mean, I don't know. You've done more seasons than I have, but I think there are some Western states that like have their muzzleloader seasons coincide with like fall bow or something. So if any of those line up, give me a call and I'll come out with you guys. But no, ever since I went on that Utah trip, like Utah is a whole other animal from New Jersey. It's just like it's breathtaking nature. It's so beautiful. And that's kind of where I picked up like my love of the spot and stalk, and I was kind of upset when realizing that New Jersey doesn't allow that. Like we're so dense, you have to do a tree stand. So I kind of do want to get into that kind of a flow because I really enjoyed, Peter and I covering all those miles on the hunt. You and I going above 10,000 feet and chasing elk and stuff like that is a lot of fun. I think I enjoy the waking up early, being on the ground, covering all that land, camping, like all that. I enjoy a lot more than driving to a parking lot, sitting in a tree, and then going back home the same day. Not that this isn't its own type of rewarding, but I think there's something more fun and more immersive about that experience. So, listen, let me know what your guys' plans are, and if there's some way for me to get in on there, I'll definitely try to make it happen. And then I do have a long way to go in learning about points and application strategies. So I'll definitely be asking you guys about that for sure.
Yeah, well, we can talk outside of the podcast and text or whatever, and we'll talk about this year's hunts. And I'm planning on. I'm not going to put together a podcast about application strategy at this point, but one of the things that I want to do, and I don't know if I'll do it this year, I want to put together a podcast focused on budgeting for Western hunting applications, because I feel like that's the big barrier for most people is they build up this thing where it's like super expensive. But if you break it down and you have a plan, it's really not that hard, especially if you start small and work your way up and add states over time. Like it's a lot easier for you to do it that way with a strategy. So I kind of want to do something like that. and talk more about how people can actually do it realistically, because it is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a
Yeah.
special elk tag in Wyoming is $2,000 this year. I mean, like,
Oof.
it's wild. Um, but we got to get you building points, even if you're not ready to hunt, even if you know you're not going to get a centerfire rifle for a while. We got to get you building points. This way, when you do get the
Mm-hmm.
rifle, you'll be ready to hunt.
Yeah. It's funny. I already have my rifle picked out, and you and I have had that conversation for a while. Like I know what I want and all that. It's just a matter of, I feel like if I have a goal to work towards, like, oh, I know in this and this month and this year we're going on this like Western hunt. I'm like, okay, well now I have to get the rifle before then, get it sighted and scoped before then, so I kind of have a goal to work against. But yeah, no, I'm definitely willing and wanting to join you guys.
All right, we'll get on that. So we're at an hour 20 right now, and we've been going for quite a bit. What final words do you have to anyone who might be listening to this podcast, someone who is trying to get started, isn't sure? What advice do you have for the next emergent hunter that's getting ready to do their first season on their own?
Yeah. Well, do what I did and talk to Andrew because he's great. And if you're listening to this podcast, and you obviously can contact him. You're super helpful. You're a great resource, both as a personal friend and getting me into this, but also like this podcast, your channel, reaching out to you on Instagram. Like I feel like you're a great resource as well. But to everyone else out there, as a general note, like if this is something that you want to try, that you have any kind of like, if you have that like the itch or the inkling of like, I want to get into this, it is doable. It is achievable. If you put the work in, you will reap the rewards. Do your research, listen to lots of podcasts, watch lots of channel, whatever method is your cup of tea. Do that. To me, honestly, started with watching Meat Eater. I watched a lot of every season that was available on Netflix. Watched it on YouTube. Like that kind of got me interested in this. And then you guys brought me out to Utah. I got that bug and kind of building up from there. But you don't have to have tens of thousands of dollars or even thousands of dollars of gear. If you want to make this happen, do your research, find the laws, find what seasons and what game animal you want to go for and all that, and you can make it happen. The barrier to entry is higher than some other hobbies, but it's not so high that you can't make it happen if you want to make it happen. So do your research, go out there, and don't let like perfect be the enemy of the great. If you don't have thousands of dollars of gear or hundreds of dollars to spend on rifles or this or that, you can make it happen. It's having the skills and the reps and the practice is more important than having the best piece of gear. Don't get stuck trying to pick something or find the perfect anything. What you have is good enough, and taking action towards doing this is better than being frozen by, I don't know what to get. I need to get this and this, and then I'm not ready because I don't have X, Y, and Z yet. You can do it. You can do it now. You can do it with what you probably already have, and with a little bit of with a little push and a little bit of research, you can absolutely make this happen for sure.
Well said. Thank you for talking me up. You made me blush there. But that being said, anyone listening to this that has questions, please reach out to me. The best way to do that is through Instagram. I'm at Endurhunt, ENDURHUNT. Shoot me a DM, comment on a post. I know that for some reason the DMs are like hidden unless we're connected. So if you send a message and I don't respond, comment on a post and say, hey, I sent you a DM, and I will see it. But I'd be happy to talk to anyone, give you advice, do what I can. I've only been doing this for 6 years. I'm no expert, but I'm happy to help the person that's next behind me. And all right, to come back full circle, I want to thank you again for coming on. It was awesome to be able to really unpack the entirety of the hunt. I have to have you come back on to have a muzzleloader, a dedicated muzzleloader podcast. So we'll have to schedule that. But seriously, thank you. It's been so awesome watching this journey so far, and I'm really excited to see what you do in the next upcoming seasons and beyond.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy that that you gave me that nudge and that push to do it. This is one of the most rewarding things that I have done, just from the process beginning to end. And then, most hobbies or most activities, like at the end of the day, like what do you have that's tangible or usable? This is a hobby where you can feed yourself, you can feed your family, you can give gifts to neighbors and friends, and like this is something that does have a real life impact, and it's the memories you build and the friendships you build, and everything that you kind of get out of it is something that you could look back on later and really just appreciate. Every time you open your fridge or your freezer and have a meal, it comes right back. So it is a very rewarding hobby, and I do recommend it to anyone that wants to pursue it.
I don't think I could say that any better. So I think we're just going to call it there. Thanks everyone for listening. Time is our most valuable asset, and I appreciate and do not take for granted that you chose to spend it with both of us. Thank you so much. Get out there, get hunting, shoot me a DM if you have questions, and thank you again, and I'll see you next time.